And we are back on Cleopatra. The time is 9:35, and I'm not going to blame it on the sunshine. I am blaming it on the Trump regime and all the tariff chaos and destruction that is happening in our government. It is under the leadership of one man, and that is your 47th president. Then the same would go if it was under a Democratic rule, but it's not. It is totally in sole control from the House, the Senate, to the executive office of Republicans. On the live line is Greg Palast. He is known for his investigative reports for The Guardian and bestsellers, including The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. He recently released his film about the latest attacks on our right to vote. It's called Vigilantes, Inc., America's New Vote Suppression's Hitmen, narrated by Rosario Dawson and produced by Martin Sheen. Leonardo DiCaprio just released the film for free at gregpalast.com. Thanks so much for being a friend of the show and coming back on with me, Greg. How are you?
Glad to be with you again, Cleopatra.
Yeah, and I'm fighting the good fight. You know, apparently the challenge now is, can you name all 17 members of the CDC? Who gives a damn? All of them are gone, along with our brain trust. And I refer affectionately to RFK Jr. as an uncooked piece of bacon that actually speaks, because that's what he looks like every time I see him.
I have to say, just so you know, Bobby Kennedy was one of my very close friends and a co-author of mine, including on my book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. And what I want to tell you is, and I had to go public. I normally don't talk about my friend's mental health, but he lost his mind. I was on the phone with him when he lost his mind. He had a physical he actually had a worm in his brain. This is no joke. He had a worm in his brain eating away at his brain. This is no joke. And also once he's had a lot of tragedy. His dad killed on TV, his uncles killed, et cetera. And then his wife committed suicide. And once his wife killed herself, she hung herself. It was horrible. He has little kids. I lost my friend mentally. He just went away. And now I normally would never talk about a friend's mental breakdown, but he's literally endangering our lives. Bobby, please, it's your friend talking. Step aside. We need a doctor. We need someone who understands medicine. You're hurting people, Bobby. Please step down.
And I really appreciate your heart and compassion and your direct announcement to him. I think it's painful to watch, this administration just blatantly and brazenly just lie. Like, I'm at a point where I'm beyond shame. Have you no shame? Have you no decency? What do you care about? And I can receive what you're saying because intimately you have the relationship. But at some point, we have to know the impact will be gravely, deeply wounding families. People will die under this regime in a multitude of ways, particularly if we can look at measles. Children, that is one of the most horrendous ways to die, and it's painful. And it is running rampant quietly because we have no speaker box from CDC to even elevate the message of danger and what people should do because of his disbelief of vaccinations.
Well, it's like the whole administration is against a vaccine for any of the things that we have to worry about in America. I mean, I was just talking to a mayor of a small town in Illinois. Well, actually, Villa Park, most of your listeners. And he's worried. This is the town supervisor, or I guess he's the president of the village board. And he's saying, they're talking about eliminating FEMA. Well, how do you have emergency evacuation? How do you, maybe Chicago has enough money to figure out its own evacuation plans. These things cost millions. I work with Suffolk County. One hurricane evacuation plan cost $20 million that I worked on.
I've reported on that several times. And this...
Yes, and they're going to let you drown. This Absolutely. Guy, in fact, the president of Villa Park, of their board of supervisors, He was a Marine, ex-Marine. He was assigned to emergency response for Hurricane Katrina. And FEMA fell down because what people don't know, you can watch another film of mine, Big Easy to Big Empty. They privatized the evacuation plan. And there was no plan for anyone who didn't have a car. So who was that? What color were those people who didn't have cars? 3,000 people drowned. He said he was pulling the bodies of pregnant women out of the water. He says people don't understand. This is not about bureaucracy. This is not waste, fraud, and abuse. These agencies, these are people who are assigned to save our lives, and they literally, your life is in danger, not only from Health and Human Services making you unhealthy and acting inhumanly. Federal emergency evacuation. Well, you know what it is? Here's your plan. Just bend over and kiss your bottom goodbye. This is what's happening. It's dangerous. This is beyond a difference in policy. We are physically in danger.
And the recklessness you speak of, I've reported in depth that the big, beautiful abomination of a bill, literally, Greg, there's not $1 allocated to the future of FEMA. FEMA is burning its wits end. And to transfer the burden onto the states is because you want to support the ultra rich is cruel, right? And unusual. And it is becoming a sense of normancy. So as I was saying before I went to break, I was in several conversations, and I was at No King's Day here in Chicago very proudly. Mm-hmm. And I just enjoyed the symposium that Rachel Maddow put on at MSNBC, her and Lawrence O'Donnell, of all of the captions across the country. I thought it was really cool to watch so many videos and the reels, right? But the bottom line is, what I couldn't help but to see was an overwhelming presence of white Caucasian people. And I said, well, where, in mass, of course, to Atlanta, there was a hyper concentration of black advocates. But in mass, I said, where are we? And I'm talking about us, my people, culturally, African Americans, blacks. And then the person said to me, well, that's not our fight. And a lot of people are looking at this as though it's not ours, and I think that is beyond. And it ain't just a black thing. It could be a brown thing. Well, Latinos out there, if they not out there. It could be some whites. I've been in a multitude of conversations where this is everyone's fight. If you are thinking about tomorrow, you need to fight today. Because literally, there's not an auspice that they are not attacking that will not infringe upon your ability to survive. And that is my thought. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm here in Los Angeles, where it is, where it's pretty much the protests are pretty much a melting pot of Hispanic. Remember, we are a Hispanic majority county in Los Angeles. And we do have a African American population, big Asian American population, obviously a lot of Caucasians, but it's been pretty mixed in Los Angeles, where people are joining hands, all races and all types. And I'm sorry to hear that this is not universal, because the fight is universal. It's everyone's fight. I talk a lot about vote suppression. If you lose your vote, Cleopatra, because you're an African-American targeted, that just canceled out my vote. That means I don't have a democracy. So all these fights are everyone's fights. There's no way around it. And we're fighting for our kids' lives. When you're telling other parents they don't have to get measles shots for their kids, well, what happens to your kid when they are in contact? This is not a joke. I mean, we wouldn't. You know what? The thing is, if you could, it's the old thing. It's like with COVID. If you could see the damage, then people would stay away. But but by the time a kid shows up at school with bumps on their face, they're infecting everyone. And our government's supposed to be protecting us. Bobby, come on, we were friends for years. We're so close. You can't do this to human beings. What's next? We're gonna have lepers on the street?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
And I actually haven't heard that since I was in South Africa.
Yeah.
Listen, as we speak, he's already replaced those that he's dismissed. And I haven't done a complete vetting of whom he's replaced, but Bottom line is, under the sound of my voice, if you can't find yourself in this fight, how do you find yourself in this world? And I think sometimes we look at it as a single issue. And I know you've come across this in the extent of your work, but this is not an immigration issue. This is not a Social Security issue. This is just an issue of life, existence, and how we go about that in a multitude of ways, whether you want to look at it from science, whether you want to look at it from Medicare and access to opportunities of housing and et cetera, education, the dismantling or the attempt to dismantle public education impacts us because that propels the trajectory of how far we go as a country. When we don't educate our youth and our children, what future will we have if we don't have the best and the brightest? You're going to have to export from somewhere.
Well, I got to tell you something, Cleopatra, which is that what they have in mind for your kids is tell your kids they don't have to get an education, can just stand out in the parking lot at Home Depot because we've cleared out all the immigrants here. So now you have, my son just lost his job as a computer programmer. So what am I supposed to tell him? Oh, wait, don't worry. Trump has tariffs. He's bringing back the iPhone assembly jobs. His Treasury Secretary says, remember see those pictures of those people in China putting the little screws in the iPhones? Well, we're bringing those jobs back. And he wasn't saying it as a joke.
No,
I
serious.
I don't want our kids putting little screws in iPhones, standing out in front of the Home Depot parking lot. Or another wonderful thing, he's all upset with Nike because they moved from China to Vietnam. Trump wants them in America. Is that what you want for your kids? You really want your kids graduating and going to sew sneakers? No, that's not what we want. Because what's happened is one of the biggest corporations, of course, in Chicago is the Boeing Corporation.
Correct.
And when Trump put the massive 100% plus tariffs on Chinese goods, they retaliated by canceling all the Boeing aircraft, it's like $500 billion in Boeing orders. Now, the average Boeing worker makes roughly $40 an hour on those plane assembly lines. So now what we're doing is Trump wants us to trade $40 an hour union jobs at Boeing Chicago, and he wants to trade them for us sewing sneakers, and they make $3 an hour in China. $3.
So the trade-off, what Greg Palast is saying, that there's no critical thought behind the decision-making of the art of the deal, right? And ultimately, we're looking like suckers. And we're going to talk about that because Trump definitely fled from GS7. Now, there's some speculations as to why, but literally he signed a document not knowing that it wasn't a European treaty. He was standing next to the Canadian president. So the fact that he didn't even know where he was, why isn't that not running rampant? Because there's a hold on white mainstream media of what image they want to portray of this president and what they want to conceal. But what I saw was a demented old man, 79 years old, fleeing from being a laughingstock of the world from the G7 summit. On the live line with me is Greg Palast. When we come back, we're going to talk about that because he had a birthday party that was one for the times, and all the attendees was everywhere else across America. We'll be back after this break.
You're listening to Cleopatra Draper. We're the talk of Chicago. WVON.
And we are back on Cleopatra. The time is 9:54. On the live line with me is Greg Palast. He's a New York Best Times seller, investigative journalist, director, reporter for the BBC, The Guardian, and Rolling Stone, and so much more. And he has this explosive film that I've actually had the time to take a look at, and his regard is very high in terms of his integrity as a journalist, and I thank you for being a friend of the show. I did pull up the newly minted 8 doctors that are to serve under RFK's appointment with the new ACIP. And, he's saying that they're highly credentialed scientists, leading public health experts, and some of America's most accomplished physicians. Joseph Hibbelin, a psychiatrist and nutritional scientist with expertise in the effects of nutrition on the brain. Go figure. Vicky Pesworth, a nurse with a PhD in public health who previously served on FDA's Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. Michael Ross, a licensed physician and former professor with a background in obstetrics and gynecology. Okay, obstetricianist. And then James Paganin, an ED physician with over 40 years of experience in the medical field. Robert Malone, a physician and researcher who has claimed to be one of the inventors of the mRNA. So he's claiming to be. That's very interesting. And has also denounced the technology. Okay, so there's one suspect. Martin Kuldroff, a Swedish biostatistician and previous member of ACIP's Vaccine Safety Subguard and FDA's Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee. Okay, so Cody Meisner, a professor of pediatrics at Dartmouth's Geisel School of Medicine and a previous member of the ACIP from 2008-2012. And then Rathfith Levy, a professor of operations management at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Levi has worked on projects around healthcare system management, but doesn't appear to have much of a publishing record on topics related to vaccines or infectious diseases. This is the 8. I will drop this link in the chat, give you time to mull over it, Greg, because I definitely want to welcome you back for your critique. I've been looking for the 17. I will find them, but this is
I have
the
to
8.
say, I actually already did some looking into these characters. Number one, they are not experts, except in fact, one thing I consider dangerous, very dangerous, is the guy who claims to be a co-inventor of the mRNA vaccines. Now, understand which is the most effective and quickest vaccine analysis. You know, this is amazing. This is a miracle drug. Now, you have to understand mRNA technology, which was created by a woman. Men should stop taking credit for women's accomplishments, by a Hungarian refugee who came up with the mRNA whole line of protective drugs. Now, understand, mRNA is probably our number one likely new defense for a possible vaccine against cancer. We could actually get a cancer shot. How about that? But now we can't, because you have Mr. I invented mRNA, and I don't endorse it. So he's picked out these characters who are. I don't mind. I'm out of the mainstream on a lot of issues, but my God, how about a little expertise here? These people, they got a nurse, they got a technician from MIT. I don't know. I wouldn't want him sticking a needle in my arm. This is very, very, very. We are literally in danger. And the idea that we could end up killing off a potential cancer vaccine, think about that. This is horrific. And not only that, but look, as an investigative reporter, those who know me, Greg Palast, you go to my site, gregpalast.com, and get the films, you get whatever. One thing you'll notice about my investigations, there are a lot about corporate and government corruption. Mm-hmm. Bobby Kennedy has a tremendous interest where he could make up to $100 million on cases he's brought against vaccine makers. Now, he says he's not going to collect the money. He's turning it over to the money will be collected by his son. Why is that not corrupt?
I mean, but is that not what the Trump regime is doing? It was yesterday that it was published that $600 million was what he earned last year in his tax reveal. I mean, from the shoes to the Bible to anything that he can sell. Yeah. Now he's selling cell phones, but he's not doing it. His children are.
You're listening to Cleopatra Draper. We're the talk of Chicago. WVON.
And we are back on Cleopatra. The time is 10:09, and we are live on Facebook. Be sure to comment with me, and I'll interact with you. On the live line is Greg Palast, New York Times bestseller, investigative journalist, director, reporter for BBC, The Guardian, and Rolling Stone, and so much more. And we are having a real conversation, and I'm grateful. And he allowed me to hold him captive. Look at that. So thank you so much. Miss Eunice has something to say to you, and I just wanted you to hear it. Miss Eunice, welcome to WVON.
Petra, good morning to you and Jack. And I want to thank him for informing us over the years. I met him a number of times at Push, and I saw your documentary. And it makes your hair rise on your head about what goes on in politics. Now, I will be 92 years old on the 29th of June, and never dreamed things would be like this after all we did to make things better for all of us. And I want you to keep up the good work, and thank God for you. And thank you, Cleopatra, for taking my call.
Oh, yes, ma'am. And I look forward to celebrating Miss Eunice and her life, Greg, 92 years young, and she is giving you some roses. So I thought you would want to hear that.
I can't thank you enough. How sweet, how kind. I remember when we met at the Rainbow Push with Reverend Jackson, and invite me to your birthday party. Maybe I can make it back to Chicago. So please, it'll be right after my own birthday.
Oh, look at that. But, I was actually just with the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. and the Rainbow Push Coalition as they celebrated their annual conference. We had the privilege to live broadcast, but most importantly, we put a target on Target's back. Reverend is still actively protesting and fighting for our rights and equity. Unfortunately, he still has to do it, but I thank God that he's here to do it. And I share that because we had a State of the Media panel you would have loved to be on and interact with. And I just want to get your take on the state of the media in this current state in 2025.
I mean, you see, they're scared and they're greedy. It's a very, very bad combination. You know, people, BBC is not government owned. It's actually consumer owned. When I work with The Guardian, we're a not-for-profit paper, and that makes a huge, huge difference when greed combines with fear. And so, for example, we had Viacom giving in and basically eliminating, removing the head of 60 Minutes because they did a very, very mild takedown on Trump, very mild stuff. And so, but 60 Minutes has been effectively shut down as an investigative reporting operation out of CBS because Viacom wants Trump to endorse their buyout by another company. So billions of dollars are on the table. And you see this also with whether it's all the other media outlets that are literally writing checks to Donald Trump personally under the idea that they're settling suits. They're not settling suits. It's called bribery. You're paying money to the president of the United States because you want approvals for mergers, you want your licenses, etc. This is pure corruption straight through and through.
So, Greg, let me ask you this. Here's my thought. I'm going to take it up a notch. Mm-hmm. We are staring down midterm, soon to be, right? And then essentially, before you blink, we'll be at this presidential cycle, which is going to be bananas. And then some say if we get there, but I do presume that we will. America has been battle tested through its inception. But here's my question to you. With all the corruption, I call it treasonous activities. I've looked at a lot of the acts under this regime and the less than 200 days to be treasonous. What is the ask of the rising leader to come after Trump? For me, I think that if they don't flee, they being all that have participated in all of these heinous acts, I think they should be jailed. I think they should, their riches be redistributed. I'm thinking like from a Robin Hood perspective, right? Like redistributed equitably to the world, right? To America first, but to the world in ways in which the richest man has killed the poorest children. What is the ask that you envision? Now, of course, the installation of the quality of life that will preserve the earth for centuries to come, right? So the protection of climate and green energy, all of this stuff that is of goodness. But what do you want out of the person that is not swindled out of the opportunity to be the next commander-in-chief?
It's interesting. Hearing even Bill Gates, of all people, saying that Elon Musk, with Trump, of course, by cutting off aid to Africa, especially on AIDS and other conditions, this is mass murder. Like you said, the richest guy in the world with the most powerful other billionaire guy in the world. These rich guys are killing poor people. It's all over the world. Now, what do we do about it? While we have got it, we've got a democracy, or at least the shreds of it. We still have some of those. We still have something to grab onto right now. Next year is the midterms, but it is this year when the GOP is using mass purges to eliminate voters from the voter roll. If you go to gregpalast.com, you'll see a story. Trump lost, vote suppression won. Here are the numbers. And I got to tell you, 4.7 million people were wrongly thrown off the voter rolls before the 2024 election. And we're going to see even a bigger number this way. Now, what do I mean by that? If you watch my film Vigilantes, Inc., which you can get for free, just go to gregpalast.com or get it on YouTube, Vigilantes Incorporated. And you'll meet there another 92-year-old woman, Christine Jordan. I was at the Atlanta polling station. She's in her walker in a storm, dressed to the nines, because she respects voting so much. She was thrown out. They said, you don't live in Atlanta anymore. She was thrown out by the Republican governor and his Secretary of State, and they took away the votes of over 300,000 people, almost all of them voters of color, without any evidence at all, fake evidence. I went to Christine Jordan's house, 92 years old. There was a picture of her with Martin Luther King, right at that same house that they said she didn't live in. I said, how do you know King? She says, he was my cousin. He came here every Sunday for dinner after church. So if they could throw Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin off the voter rolls, they can throw you off too. This is the game. This is horrific.
And Greg, let me ask you, like, she's still in that house. How does that stand? What is the validation beyond that? What became of that?
You know what they did? They play these games. And when I say they, and I'm not partisan about this. I'm not for Republicans or Democrats, but it's basically the Republicans knowing the color of black votes, which is blue. And what they did was they took mail forwarding information from the post office. And there's a lot of reasons why your mail is forwarded. In Christine Jordan's case, she was 92. She was having her niece read her mail. You'll see in our film, Major Gamaliel Turner. This is a man who was assigned to an African-American assigned to California, career military. And they said, well, you're not in Georgia, so you can't vote in the Georgia election. I'm sorry. Soldiers get to vote absentee even if they're black in America. This is what changed the outcome of the election. So what we have to do now is dedicate ourselves to voting, protecting the vote, protecting our own vote. Please check your registration. Make sure that you haven't been challenged. That's the other trick that they're doing, this old Ku Klux Klan business of challenging individual voters. They're sending out these voter vigilantes. You'll see that in the film, too. That's why it's called Vigilantes, Inc., because we just had at least 350,000 challenges in the last election, not made by government, but by guys who are using an old Klan system of individuals challenging your right to vote. So Greg Palast can say, Cleopatra doesn't live in Chicago. She shouldn't be allowed to vote. Well, who am I? I'm not the government. But it has removed literally hundreds of thousands of voters of color have lost their vote to this Ku Klux Klan style vigilante challenges. And there's virtually no media coverage, which goes back to your other question. Where is the media? Again, the problem is that they're scared of Trump and they're greedy. And they don't want to report these stories that get between them, these billionaires that own these media outlets. They don't want anyone getting between them and their next billion. And if the news gets in the way, well, you ain't going to hear it.
And Greg Palast is breaking it down for us in terms of what is truly happening. And this is not just between red or blue states. This is transpiring wherever there are colored counties right here in Illinois practicing the same exact practice. When we come back, I am going to ask you, Greg, about this birthday party. I have to get your take on this. When we come back, Greg Palast, you don't want to miss this. We'll be back.
You're listening to Cleopatra Draper. We're the talk of Chicago. WVON.
On the live line is Greg Palast. And Greg, I was asking you, and you can't avoid this $1 million question because it cost us $45 million. What was your take on Donald Trump's birthday party?
Oh, well, I guess he didn't invite me to blow out a candle, but yeah, that was quite a. We were the ones who got stuck with the bill. It's like he ate the cake, we get the bill. So he has his, one of the when we have no Kings rallies, and the big one there in Chicago, which was quite amazing. That was one of the biggest of all cities, and so what we do have here is these parades are not used to scare off our enemies. Like here we have a big army, don't mess with us. Because it's easy to mess with Trump. Taco, Trump always chickens out. So, yeah, so you can have all the tanks you want, but if you're a chicken that's going to grab your ankles every time China sneezes, then we're in trouble. These parades are not meant to scare our enemies or our rivals. These parades are meant to terrify the public. That's why dictators have these parades, because they're telling their own people, here's what's going to come down on you if you make too much noise or raise objections. So it's not about showing off America's military power to the world. It's about trying to intimidate the American public. And it's not a coincidence that he had troops in the streets here in Los Angeles. Troops in the street. I don't know. I go out. I don't see any riots. But there's troops in the street while he's having a parade. So he's making a very clear point. This is aimed at us.
Absolutely. And, unfortunately, as we pivot, simultaneously, a sociopathic murderer was on the loose running rampant in Minnesota. 57 years old, white male, dressed in a police uniform, execution style, guns down the Speaker of the House and her husband, and also attempted to assassinate the sitting senator and his wife. Give me your take on this, because apparently Trump won't. As a sitting United States president, he has yet to express his condolences. I've seen the insults and the snickering and laughter from Republican leadership at the laughter of their death and attempt of life taken from the U.S. Senator. I am just at awe what I'm witnessing, and as the details are coming out, more than 45 Democratic leaders across the country was on his hit list. What's your take on this?
Well, in a way, I'm glad that Trump didn't give us a phony statement of condolence, because we know he wouldn't mean it. The problem is that Agent Orange, our erstwhile president, has created an atmosphere of violence. And remember, you had policemen die because of that attack on January 6th in 2021. And they got pardoned. You had cops that died, and they were pardoned. So maybe this guy thought that what he's going to get from Trump is a pardon, and maybe the Congressional Medal of Honor. We don't know with this guy. I mean, he literally pardoned killers. He's pardoned thieves, literally billionaire thieves that have stolen $1 billion. Silk Road, the guy who founded Silk Road, which was basically a drug bazaar. How many people died from drug overdoses because of this guy who had basically a life prison sentence for the people he killed, and Trump pardoned him to help promote his cryptocurrency? This is sick. So you can't just take this killing isolated. We have a president condoning, endorsing, and pardoning killers, and maybe this guy thought, well, hey, I'll take my chances with Trump. I can shoot anyone I want. I just say that Trump's wonderful. I'm very concerned about this.
And that logic of thinking, unfortunately, is probably accurate in terms of his methodology. But here's the kicker. From a black woman surviving America, Greg, I must say, I am always amazed when I see white murderers that live to tell the story. See, he'll live on our dime and our expense as taxpaying residents being studied for his heinous acts and cruelty for the rest of his unnatural days because we've extended it, because we've paid for his stay on this earth with his cruel acts that he committed. Political attacks should not be supported on either side in no form or space, but he lived unarmed, unscathed to tell the story. That never really happens in black America. But black America really don't go on too many brutal attacks like that, but we've had our moments too. But usually when it is of a white male murderer that has run rampant, they live to tell the story. That's amazing to me.
Yes, well, you'll see in our film Vigilantes where you can't divorce the violence today from the history of violence. And in Vigilantes, the film, we do explain that vote suppression is the long result of an elite in America trying to hold on to its power, because vote suppression, which is basically a fancy word for shafting black people out of their votes, it's class war by other means, because the black community, there's been shifts, yes, I know, but it is a progressive voting bloc. And by progressive, that's another fancy word for saying we're going to try to tax the billionaires instead of letting the billionaires tax us. And that's why they are afraid of your vote. And so you can't separate current vote suppression and current violence from a long history of suppression, enslavement, and violence. You know, one thing you'll find out in my film, as you know, is that the current governor of Georgia, it was his family that first brought Africans in chains to the American South. Most people do not realize that it was the South, not the North, that actually prohibited slavery in most of the Deep South, in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, that area. Enslavement was against the law until the current governor's family got a special dispensation from the King of England, from King George, to bring in Africans in chains. And so you have to understand that these things go together. The Kemp family, which used to be called the Habershams, Kemp can't keep his power, his multi-million-dollar plantations. He still has a big company called Plantation LLC, if you can imagine. They can't hold on to these powers that they stole from black people over centuries. How do we reverse this injustice? Well, it ain't going to happen if you have basically the people that profited off your pain and death, if they are still in power. And the only chance we have is voting them out. And yeah, with all the vote suppression and difficulties, well, hey, who said it was going to be easy? Ask Mrs. Jordan, ask Martin Luther King's cousin. She was willing to go to court in her walker to get her vote back.
Well, I thank you, Greg.
Turner did too. Yes.
You know, it'll be many more times when we can unpack this, because I am interested in unpacking that role to Governor Kemp. I find him to be very interesting. But you're right. I teach this to my babies. Nothing good comes easy. Nothing good. Thanks so much for the time today.
Okay. No kings, but I want to shout out to my queen in Chicago. Thanks.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Sonia just loves you. Listen, guys, we're going to pack into this newsroom. When we come back, Tommy Cliff, I see you on the live line. Hold tight. We'll be back after this break.